Hey guys, this is Kirk from Go Make Music, and today you are in part 2 of our Foundations of EQ series. If you haven't watched the first video on the frequency spectrum and the 10 octaves of human hearing, go check that out first, do the homework, and then come to this lesson. Also, before we dive in, why don't you pull up your DAW, whether it's GarageBand or Logic or Pro Tools or FL Studio, whatever, pull it up. Grab one of your mixes or some of your loops, or even grab a song that you like that's out right now, download it, drag it into your DAW, and then put an EQ on it so you can follow along with what we're doing. That will really help you. Let's get started. Today we're going to talk about the 3 types of EQs and their parameters. Now what you're going to have is filters, which are these guys, top and bottom. Shelves, which are these guys. They look like shelves. And parametric EQs, which are all these. Let's look at the filters first. You have this filter right here, which is called a high pass filter. Now it's confusing because it's on the low end. So some people will call this a low cut, and some people will call it a high pass. Now, if you think about what it's doing, let's listen. As I move it up, I'm cutting the lows, but I'm letting the highs pass through. All right, so I'm cutting the lows out to low cut, but I'm also letting the highs pass through. So it's a high pass. So remember that. Low cut, high pass. You also have the high cut, which is letting the lows pass through. So I've cut all the highs and I'm letting the lows pass through. So those are my filters. Okay, so let's look at the parameters of the filters. And really, you have the same basic parameters for all 3, but they work in slightly different ways. You have the frequency, the cutoff frequency, or the frequency at which the filter is going to start doing its job, right? So the higher I go, the more it cuts. And I like to use the actual numbers. So I just grab the number, click it with my mouse, and move it up and down. I just like to work that way. So that's your frequency. The second parameter is your slope. Okay, the slope is how fast it's going to cut at that frequency. So the higher the dBs per octave, the faster it's going to go. The lower the dBs per octave, the more gentle the curve. So let's look at this. So let's say I'm going to go to 120. That's my frequency cutoff. Now at 6 dB per octave, that means from 120 to 60, because 60 is an octave below 120, it's going down 6 dB. So from 120 to 60, it's cutting it by 6 dB. Now if I go up to a 12 dB slope from 120 to 60, now this is 12 dB. And then from 18, it's 18 dB to 60, and 24 and 48. So let's just listen to how the slope affects the sound of the filter. A little more lows. A little more. Right? So this slope is a critical part of your filter parameter. Don't forget about playing with the slope. Now the last parameter is your Q. This acts as an additional slope, but it also creates a bump. The higher you go, it creates a bump at the cutoff filter. And this can be useful for creating resonant filter effects. Right? It's also could be cool for just adding a little bit of bump if you're going to do a cutoff. So you can use it subtly, or you can use it extreme, or you can leave it to a place where it's not going to bump at all. And that way you're just doing your cut. Okay, so that's your low cut high pass filter. This is essentially doing the same thing. It's just doing it on the top end. So let me bring this down to nothing. And we'll just explore the frequency. Bringing it down. And then I can play with the slope if I want to bring some of that top end back. So you get a little more top. A little more. A little more. A little more. I could create a bump at the frequency. So what I want you to do is just grab a mix, pause this, and then pull up the filters, play with the slopes, add a bump, take it away, see what's going on in your mix or in the mix that you're referencing. You could even do what's called like a band pass and just listen to a specific part of the frequency spectrum of the mix and see what's going on. This is a trick I learned from David Pensato and did when I was first getting started in music making. So you just kind of listen to different parts and see what's actually living there. It's a great little exercise. All right, so do that and then come back. All right, the next type of EQ that we're going to work with is the shelf. So that's these guys. They actually look like a shelf. You can boost it, you can cut it. The filters are our broad stroke, kind of removing or adding effects to a sound. A shelf is going to be a tonal shaping EQ. So think of it like a car stereo. You know, they have those knobs, one's bass and one's treble. And basically you can turn it up or down. And that's pretty much all you can do. That is essentially acting like a shelving EQ. I could do this boost and I can go up and I can go down. On a car stereo, that's basically all you have is you can go up or you can go down, right? So let's go down and it'll be darker. And go up and it'll be brighter. Same thing with the low end. I can go up for more low end. I can go down. So in a car stereo, that's kind of all you got is up and down. And these are fixed, these points of where the frequency goes up and down. Now, in a shelving EQ that you have, the more flexibility that you have is that you can adjust this frequency. So I could say I'm going to go up 7 dB, but I'm going to bring it down to where I'm just doing a shelf in the sub lows. Or I could say, you know what, I want to do a shelf all the way up here. Or I could say, you know what, it's getting a little out of control in the low end. Maybe I'm just going to tuck it back. So that's the beauty of a shelving EQ, is that it lets you adjust the point of the tone that you want to either boost or cut. And then you have this parameter, which is a Q, which acts like a slope, which you can make a very gentle shelf or you can make a very sharp shelf. Okay? So there you go. That's your shelf. Those are very, very useful. So pause this, go to your mix, go to your loops, and play with the shelves. Do a boost, sweep the frequency, adjust the curve, and decide what you like. The third type of EQ that you're going to run into is called a parametric EQ. And this is the most flexible EQ that you will have because you can sweep the frequency around pretty much all around from the bottom to the top. And then you can do your cuts and your boosts, and then you can adjust this Q. This Q is going to make things wider or more narrow. Now, as a general rule or guideline, if you're going to do boosts, you generally want a more wide Q. If you're going to do cuts, you're generally going to want a more narrow Q. So we'll get into that more in the next video when we talk about philosophy and application, but I just wanted to let you know that. So with a parametric EQ, you might be adding a little bit of presence. Right? You might be scooping out a little mud. So it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So again, pause this, go back, play with the parametrics on either a mix or on individual tracks and see what's going on. Now there is a parametric EQ that has a super narrow bandwidth, super narrow Q. And this is called a notch, because it's just one little part of the frequency spectrum that you're notching. Now, typically you would use this to clean up maybe feedback in a live situation, or you could find some problem resonant frequencies. One way to do this is to kind of pan and scan. So I'm going to do a very narrow bandwidth, and then I'm going to scan and see if I find some problem frequencies. It's almost like a whistle. Now I know that this guitar sound is actually right around 500, so I just want to show you what a notch can do if I wanted to clean something up. You hear that? So that note is right around 500 hertz. So let's say it was too hot and I wanted to take it out. I would basically find it and then get rid of it. So now it's gone. There's also kind of that high-end whistle. I don't mind it, but I could try to get rid of it too. I'll show you. You hear that? And now once you hear it, you can't unhear it. I don't actually mind it. I might pull it out in a mixing situation, but I'm showing you what a notch is used for. It's for cleaning up little problem frequencies, little resonant frequencies. In a live situation, it might be feedback, but they're really, really useful. So again, just to recap, you have your filters on the top and bottom. These are your broad stroke cuts. Make sure you experiment with the slopes and the bumps. You have shelves, which are tonal shaping EQs that you can boost and cut and adjust the frequency. Finally, you have parametric EQs, which you can use to do broad boosts, narrow boosts, broad cuts, narrow cuts. And you can even go super narrow and use it as a notch. So here's your homework. Pull in your mixes or loops or reference and experiment with all of these different types of EQs. If this has been helpful for you, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel so you can get new stuff every week. Also, I want you to grab the Foundations of EQ reference guide here in the link. You can also view the whole course on the Foundations of EQ at www.gomakemusic.org. Just click on the Free Resources tab and look for Foundations of EQ. All right, now go make music.